So today I get to talk to you about one of my favorite subjects, which is codes and cryptography. Now that's actually two very different subjects. Coding is a whole area of mathematics, and cryptography is another area of mathematics. And they both involve codes. So I'm going to talk about the difference first, and we're going to talk about both of them today. So the purpose for coding is to store information so that it doesn't get lost, so that you can always retrieve it. The purpose for cryptography is so that you can store or send information so that only the people you want to can retrieve it. So there's a little bit of a difference there. So let's start by talking about coding. Now, let's say we've developed computers, right? And we have storage media on which we want to put our files, right? We have our little flash drives, or we have our hard drives on our computers, right? We want to put our information on those objects. The problem is the information will get corrupted. In fact, around us, everywhere, we're constantly being bombarded by cosmic rays from space. Not at a very high rate, not enough to give us, cancer or anything like that. But it just happens to us all the time. And if you go on the airplane, you actually get a lot more because you got less atmosphere protecting you from space. But even down here, we get a decent amount of cosmic radiation that hits us. When it hits a hard drive, it can cause one of the little ones to turn to a 0 or zeros to turn to a 1. How often does this happen? Probably once about every 20 hours or so, which means that all of the information on your hard drives are getting changed all the time, every day. This is a problem, because if you change information, it corrupts, right? And suddenly you can't read it anymore. So we need some way of verifying that the information is correct. So the first thing we'll talk about is error detecting codes. When there is an error, we want it to encode the information in such a way that we can detect if there's an error. That way we know if it's been corrupted or not. Sound good? We actually use this all the time. We use it on barcodes. So if you have an object, I think my pens have barcodes. No, they don't. But there's a lot of items that do have barcodes on them, and the little they call them UPC, Universal Product Codes. And those little items, they have a special number on them to help tell if the information was correct or not. And what they're using is what's called a check digit. So I'm going to come over here to the board, and we're going to just take a look at what I mean by that. Let's say we have a number, and we want to detect if there's an error in it. I'll just make up a number. 2, 9, 7, 3, 5, 4, 6. Let's say I have this number, and I need to encode it, and I want to make sure that if someone is writing down this information or scanning it on a computer, that if there's a mistake in it, it detects that, hey, there's been a mistake here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the digits. What do I get when I add the digits? 2 plus 9 is 11 plus 7 plus 3, 21 plus 5 plus 4 plus 6. You get 36, right? So now I've got 36, but what I want is I want a multiple of 10. So what would I need to put on there to make it a multiple of 10? A 0. The sum to be a multiple of 10. The sum to be a multiple of 10. Right now the sum is 36. Oh, so you want it to that. So if I put on a 4 here, then when I add them all up, the sum will be 40. So far, so good? All right, so now what we got to do is, like if this is some sort of a barcode that we got to scan, we'll put this whole number down. What if one of these numbers scans wrong? If any one number in this thing scans wrong, if we scan it in and we get 295355464, that's wrong, correct? What's going to happen? It's going to add these guys all up, and it's going to get 38. Does everyone see what I'm talking about? And when it does that, it says, there's an error. And it knows that this is the wrong code. Something has been changed. This is important because when you go to the store, you don't want to be charged for caviar if you are buying toilet paper, right? And they might be just off by one number, and suddenly you're being charged for the wrong thing. If you're the store, they're buying caviar, you don't want to just charge them for toilet paper, right? You want to make sure you're charging the right amount, and as you're a customer, you want to make sure you're paying the right amount. And so, if you've ever been to the grocery store and they scan something, it gives error, 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 that means that it's not scanning properly. There's a number wrong as it's scanning. It might be a little blur or something on the number or whatever it is. And so they have to take a look at it, and at that point, they'll look at the number and have to type it in by hand. Hopefully they'll get that right. And if they do that right, then it'll stay correct. And they'll always check it to make sure it's the right item. And so this is what we call an error-correcting code. The problem is, so this is a great code. It can detect any error, any single error in the number. But it has one problem. This, by the way, is what they use in what's called the postnet code. So you've seen those little bars down at the bottom of whenever you get a mail, there's these little, often yellow bars down at the bottom of the mail that they printed on your letter. That's called the postnet code. And this is what they use for the postnet code. They use this very method. And that way, if it scans, they know that it will go to the right place as long as they put the right number on there. And the machines will read it and be able to tell where it goes.
But what if one of the numbers goes up and one of the numbers goes down and it still reads 40?
Yeah, so the problem is if you have more than one error, it might not catch it, right? You could have one of them going up 2 units, the 7 goes down to the 5, but the 4 goes up to a 6. If this is 664, now it says 40, and it won't catch the error. So this, what we say is this will catch all one-digit errors, and it will catch most multiple errors, but not all of them. There's always the chance that a 2-digit error could be just the right way to balance out. In fact, 2-digit errors is only going to catch 90% of them. And 3-digit errors, I think it catches about like 91% or something. I don't remember what it is. But it catches all 1-digit errors and most multiple-digit errors. Kind of cool? It's not perfect, though. The other problem is there are certain errors that are very common that this kind of coding won't catch. And it's probably the most common error when people are typing. Any ideas what that might be? When people are typing a number in, there's an error that's very common. It's called a transposition mistake, where you swap 2 numbers. This is not going to catch swapping 2 numbers. If you swap 2 consecutive numbers, they're still going to add to the same thing. Does everyone see the problem? So with universal product codes and also things like the International Standard Book Numbers, ISBN, every book has an ISBN on it. It's called an International Standard Book Number. And so both the Universal Product Code and ISBN use a different coding technique for their codes because they want to be able to catch it if people swap 2 consecutive numbers. And it's really just a variation on this. What they would do is they would multiply. So if we don't know what the check digit is there, right? They're going to get a slightly different check digit. What they're going to do is they're going to multiply this number by 3. Multiply this number by 1. This number by 3. This number by 1. This number by 3. This number by 1. This number by 3. And then they're going to add them up. 2 times 3 is 6. 9 times 1 is 9. 3 times 7 is 21. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 5 is 15. 1 times 4 is 4. 3 times 6 is 18. And here's an interesting fact. Since all I care about is if it's a multiple of 10, do I care about the tens digit? The only thing that really matters is the ones digit, right? If the ones digit is 0, it's a multiple of 10. If the ones digit is not 0, then it's not a multiple of 10. So when I add 6 plus 9 is 15, but I can forget about the 10. It's just like 5. Just keep track of the ones digit, right? 5 plus 21 is 6, because the 20 is worthless for our purposes. 6 plus 3 is 9. 9 plus 5 is 4. 4 plus 4 is 8. 8 plus 8 is 6. So I'm still going to end up with 6. I'm still going to need a 4 here, right? Now what's going to happen if I swap two numbers? If this 4 and this 6 swap, I'll be multiplying the wrong number by 3, and it will catch the error. Kind of cool? And that's the way we catch errors using a special code. When we're scanning stuff at the store, or when you're buying books, or when you're, all the barcodes they use to keep track of everything. That's the method we use today. It's really kind of slick, isn't it? So when it scans and it says beep, error, that just means they've got a scanning error. It's not scanning the right numbers for some reason. And it knows you're not scanning the numbers. It's really clever. It's a way to catch mistakes. Kind of cool?
Yes.
There's a naive way to do it, which is very expensive in terms of information. You could just double the number, right? I could put 2973546, and I could just write the number twice. The problem with that, of course, is it's very long. This is a very quick way, just one extra digit, and it can catch most mistakes. Cool, huh? All right, but it would be better if we could correct mistakes. On my hard drive, catching the mistake is one thing, but that still doesn't tell me what it was supposed to be. So they actually have a method to encode information on your hard drive. It was developed by the guy by the name of Hamming, who worked at Bell Labs. And Hamming produced a code we now call the Hamming code. And what it does is it attaches several check digits, and it allows you to correct mistakes. Instead of just detecting if there's a mistake, it will correct the mistake. So let me show you how this works with what we call the 7-4 Hamming code. I'm going to draw kind of a Venn diagram picture here with 3 circles. Let's say we have 4 digits. Now, we're in the world of computers now, right? So what we want to do is we want to put our information in such a way that we can see if there's an error and know where the error is so we can fix it. And that's where this thing comes in. Let's say we have 4 digits that we want to encode, which is, we'd call it half a byte. There's a half a byte of information on a computer. With computers, everything's in zeros and ones, right? So that makes this a little bit simpler. If I want to encode this information, I will put this information in here. My first digit's going to go here, my second digit here, my third digit here, and my fourth digit I'll put down here in the overlapped areas. Sound good? So that's 1011. And then what I'll do is I'll put a fifth digit here, a sixth digit here, and a seventh digit over here. And what I'll do is I will make sure that I put a 1 or a 0 in the proper places so that every circle has an even number of 1s. In this point, this circle has 2, in fact, all the circles have 2 1s in them, right? So I don't need to add any more. So I'll put a 0 here, a 0 here, and a 0 here. And every circle has an even number of 1s. Make sense? What if there were a mistake? So that means I'll put 0, 0, 0. What if there's a mistake somewhere? 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0. Now I've made a mistake, right? If this is what, this number gets flipped in there. So when I look at this, I take this number and I put it back into the Venn diagram. And I put 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0. But I notice something's wrong. This circle has two 1s in it. That's an even number, right? But this circle has only one 1 in it. And this circle has only one 1 in it. Both of those are odd. But because both of them are odd, I know the error must be where those two circles overlap, but the third one does not. So I know that the error has to be that digit. And so if this is information on a hard drive, when I read the information, it recognizes there's an error. It figures out where that error is and fixes it for me. Cool? So this way, we call this an error correcting code. So if I give you a number, if I give you this number, I'm going to give you 0111101. Is this number in error? And if so, where is the error? Just got to fill it out, right? 0111101. How many ones are in this circle? 3. How many ones are in this circle? 2. How many ones are in this circle? 4. Are all of them even? No. This one is not even. So where is the error? The error is in this circle, but not either of the other circles. So I know the error is this one right here. That should have been a 0. My check digit should have been a 0 there. Now, if that one flips, then they're all even, correct? Isn't that clever? So you're always going to be able to tell if there's a single error, where the error is. Unfortunately, this will not correct for 2 errors, but it will correct for 1 error. These kind of codes, these Hamming codes, are used extensively. All your computers use them. When you send information over the internet, they send it all in Hamming codes. It's just so easy for noise to make one little bit flip, and it's suddenly going to corrupt all your data. So they send it in Hamming codes. They're actually they're sending 8 at once and using 4 Hamming code bits. And it works. So they're sending 12 bits of information for every 8 of actual information that you want to send. They send 12 to correct code, to correct errors. Cool, huh? If you didn't do this, you would have errors all the time, and all of our files would corrupt. But since they do this, it makes our data much more secure. Now, we use this all the time. In the space program, when we sent information to and from the Voyager satellites, or the Voyager missions, Voyager went to take pictures of like Jupiter and Saturn and Neptune and Uranus, right? And when they send information back, there's so much noise in space, and it takes so long to send the information back to us, we were worried that we'll get more errors than this. So we actually used a code that sends, we have 11 bits of information at a time, but we throw on 12 bits of error correction. And it will correct any 3 errors, which is really cool. And that's what we use because it's much more expensive time-wise if we get an error to tell it, send that again, because it takes several hours for this information to get to us. It's how long it takes light to get to us from where the Voyager is. So it's better to use an inefficient code that corrects for several errors at once. So that's the kind of code we use. We also use this kind of stuff when we code CDs. So when you have an audio CD or a DVD, there is no way that we can keep minute scratches from happening. Minute scratches happen all the time on those disks. Just the dust in the air will be enough to scratch those disks, and we're going to get errors. So what they do is they encode the information just like this, except for they do it interlaced, which means they'll break up the information with about 4,000 bits at a time. So if I have, 20,000 bits, it'll take the first, it'll encode them, and then it'll put 1 here, and then 4,000. The next bit would be 4,001 places down. And the next one will be 4,001 places down from that one, et cetera. And it keeps going around in a circle. We call that interlacing the information. What that does is if you get a bunch of errors in a row, because a scratch might cover up several consecutive bits. And that's what we're worried about. Notice that this won't, if you get consecutive errors, you got a problem. So they spread the data out on your disk. Because of that, you can get 4,000 straight errors, and it will still be able to correct them all. Cool, huh? And if you didn't do that, CDs simply wouldn't work. We take them out and we handle them, and we, and they get minute scratches all the time. That's why you can look at them and say, oh, there's a lot of scratches on it. It still works, though. Sometimes it will. Sometimes you get the scratches in exactly the wrong places where it still messes up. Right? That can happen. But most of the time, the data is spread out enough that that doesn't happen, and we actually have a really robust CD encoding information so that we almost always get the information out that we wanted. Cool, huh? This doesn't mean you can scratch your CDs all you want. The more scratches there are, the more likely you're going to have 2 errors in exactly the wrong places to mess up your data. But it's not, just getting a scratch is not the end of the world. Cool, huh? All right. So now let's talk about getting information to someone where I don't want someone. So the purpose of coding is to make sure that we can always get the information back that we wanted to. All computers, all internet communications, our phones now, they all use this stuff to, these Hamming codes to make sure that the information is kept secure. And by secure, I mean it's not going to be lost due to errors. Now we want it to be secure in another way. We don't want other people to be able to listen into our communications. So this area of math is called cryptography. And cryptography is lots of fun. There's lots. How many people played with different codes before? Ever made a coded message before and sent them to friends? Everyone done that before? Oh, if you haven't done it, you're missing out. Sending coded messages is really fun. The simple way of coding is what we call a simple substitution cipher. And what that means is we just make up different symbols for the letters. That's what most people have done with coding, right? So now we're getting away from coding and getting into cryptography. Most people's crypto systems are these simple substitution ciphers. Here's what you do. You just take A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, etc., and then make a symbol for every word. You can make A be a star, and B be a flower, and C be a spiral, and D be a squiggle, and E be a triangle, and F be an asterisk. And whatever, right? And you can spell words, and you just use the symbols that you picked, right? Here we go, we'll pick if I want to say the word face, this is using all the letters I got so far, it would be asterisk, star, spiral, and triangle, right? These kind of codes are notoriously easy to break, right? In fact, there's puzzles like this in the newspaper, where they'll just use other letters. They'll just put the alphabet mixed up over here. And then all you got to do is they'll give you a message encoded, and you have to break it. They call them cryptograms. They're little puzzles you can see in newspapers and magazines. Or you can buy whole books of them. I like to do them. They're kind of fun. You just take a look at the words, and you try to figure out by how frequent the letters are used, because E is used a lot more often than X. And you can use that to start making guesses as to what symbol represents what letter, or what in the cryptograms, which letter represents which other letter. And then start decoding the message, and then look at patterns of letters and figure out other letters, and then you're done, right? So these are not very secure. The simplest ones of these are called shift ciphers. I'm going to call this one the C code, where A gets moved 2 down letters to C. B becomes D, because D is 2 letters down. Does that make sense to everybody? C would go 2 letters to E, and et cetera. So if you had a word like Hawaii, right? H-I-J, A-B-C, W-X-Y, A-B-C, I-G, what's after I? J-K, K. That would be what we would write. To decrypt it is really easy. We just subtract 2 letters from each one, right? I'll call this the C code. We also have the D code, where A goes to D, which means we add 3 letters every time, right? And we'll have the E code, and we'll have the F code, and we'll have a bunch of these codes. These are called shift ciphers. They're notoriously easy to, or sometimes they're called rotation ciphers, because they have those little keys where you just rotate the alphabet around the little circle. Have you seen those decoder things you get from magazines and stuff, from kids' magazines? They have these decoder stuff. Happy Meals would have them. Mm-hmm. And they're really fun. But these are sometimes called rotation. Now there's one called ROT13, which is famous in computer science, because there's 26 letters, so 13 is halfway around, which is nice because if you do it twice, you get back where you started. And they actually use that as a simple cipher in lots of different applications in computer science. For back in the old, no one uses ROT13 anymore, but it's kind of there's some fun historical facts with that one, if you ever want to look that one up, ROT13. But we can use this, though, to generate much better ciphers. In World War II, what we would do is what the Allied forces, the U.S. and Great Britain and all our allies, what the U.S. would do, our military units in World War II in Europe had a special code. It's called the Vigenère cipher. What they would do is they have a keyword every day. Like, let's say our keyword was flower. Then what we would do is, instead of just using one rotation cipher or one shift cipher, we would use a different shift cipher for every letter. If we had a message, we would use F for the first letter of the message. Then we would use the L cipher for the second letter of the message. Then we would use the O cipher for the third letter of the message. And then the W cipher for the fourth letter of the message. And the E cipher for the fifth letter. And then for the 6th letter, we would use R, and then for the 7th letter, we would start over again and use the F cipher again. Kind of cool? This is breakable. In fact, I have a tool that I have access to on my computer that I can usually break these in about 30 seconds or so. You give me a bunch of text, I put the text in. It takes longer for me to enter the text in than it takes me to break the code. Breaking the code is pretty easy. However, that's because I have a computer. Back in World War II, they didn't have computers. It took the best mathematicians about 2 or 3 days to be able to break one of these ciphers. You have to get the keyword, and the first thing you get is you have to attack it and get the length of the word. Once you get the length, you can start attacking the letters. But it takes a while. It takes so long that it took 2 to 3 days for top mathematicians of their day by hand to break these codes. So that's what they would do. They would use this shift cipher to send messages for the day to all their companies so they all knew where to go. Then that day's password is done, and that day's keyword is done. You get rid of it. The next day, you have another keyword. That way, people breaking the codes were always 2 days behind, and they could never. By then, your enemy already knows what you did, where you went. Make sense? So it was an effective code for their day, but it's not effective now. But now we can do better. Now we have something, and this is something that's been used for a long time, called a one-time pad. A one-time pad is really interesting. It's a very, very long string of random letters. And by long, I mean pages and pages, millions of letters. And what you do is you use this string of millions of letters as your key. The reason you can break a Vigenère cipher is because the key has a certain length, and the first thing you have to do is figure out how long the keyword is. Well, if the keyword is longer than your message, there is no way to break the code at all. Because by picking the right shift letter, you can turn any message into any other message you want. Pick any two four-letter words, tree and light, L-I-T-E. T-R-E-E and L-I-T-E, right? Tree and light. If you just pick the right shifts, you can turn one into the other. And if your keyword is a long word that's longer than your message, there's no way to figure out what the message was supposed to be. Kind of cool? The key for a one-time pad is you have to deliver the one-time pad to the other person who's getting the message. So if you want to break a one-time pad, what you have to do is you have to intercept the pad and figure out the key before it's used. Does that make sense? And that's the only way to break the code, is to get a copy of the key. There is no other way to break the code. And this used to be used for banking systems, because banking systems require a lot of codes. You need a lot of secrets for the banking system, right? You got to transfer information and money, and you don't want other people to see what you're doing. And so they would do this. And back in the day, back before all the new security measures that they started in this century on airlines, you used to see people traveling with briefcases manacled to their wrist on the airplanes. Anytime you traveled, you'd see people in the airports with these things. You can't have them anymore because of security risks, I guess. But you used to see them all the time. What they were carrying most of the time wasn't money, wasn't anything super valuable. It was a list of, it was pages and pages of a one-time pad. So that banks or government institutions or whoever could get information back and forth. Kind of cool? And then once you use that pad once, you throw it away, which is why it's called a one-time pad. This is now being used today in what we call quantum cryptography. Currently at Los Alamos National Lab, they have a special way of using one-time pads to keep information perfectly secure. What they do is when they send information, they send two pieces of information always. The first thing they always send is a one-time pad. And they send it using a particular quantum method to a central computer. Now here's the deal. The way they're doing it, if someone observes the data on the way, it changes the nature of the information. Kind of cool? This is one of the cool things about quantum mechanics. If you observe something en route, in between two locations, it changes the nature of the data. So what they do is they send a one-time pad, and if it gets there unobserved, it uses it for the rest of the information that comes. If it gets there and it's observed, it sends back, says error. And you got to send it again. And it keeps sending until you get an unobserved one-time pad, which means there is no way anyone can actually ever break the code. It's an absolutely unbreakable code, and it's done using quantum mechanics and one-time pads. The problem with this is it's not usable on a giant scale. It's usable on a small scale where you have a central computer that can do everything to and from that computer. So the only way to break that code is to actually break into the central computer. Nothing else will work. You can't observe information anywhere else, which is really cool. So you can't do it with the internet now because there's not a central place for the internet to send all its information to and from. But they do use it. This is what they're actually using right now at Los Alamos National Lab for internal communications, is this really cool quantum security system. And there is no way to break the code. It's perfectly secure, as long as you keep that central computer from being hacked. Cool? All right, what do you do for the internet in general? Unfortunately, we don't have this trick for the internet in general. We have to use other tricks. And there's two kinds of codes. I'm going to briefly talk about them that we're using. One kind of code is called a symmetric code, and the other is called an asymmetric code. A symmetric code means if you know how to encode it, you also know how to decode it. The process for encoding and the process for decoding is the same. That's really useful, because if you exchange keys, if you send a key, you'll both have the key. The problem with that is you both have to have the same key, and nobody else can have it. Examples of this, the current one we usually use is called AES, for Advanced Encryption System. It's the one that is suggested, it's one that the federal government uses to secure its own information. The keys they're using are 256 characters long. And it's a very, very secure method of information exchange. The problem is the keys. So what we do is we use something called an asymmetric code to send the key. Usually the asymmetric code we're using is called RSA. RSA is an old code. And by old, it was developed in the 1950s or 60s by three guys by the name of Rivest, Shamir, and Adelman, which is what RSA stands for. Ron Rivest is still making codes. I saw him give an online lecture last year. He's still doing stuff. It's really fun to watch them, but their code they came up with is based on, it's a really simple system based on something done by a guy by the name of Fermat in the 1600s, or the 16th century, 1700s. So Fermat came up with this thing, and Rivest, Shamir, and Adelman came along and they said, hey, we can use this to send information. And this information is interesting because it has two keys, an encryption key and a decryption key, and they are mostly unrelated to one another. So you can give everyone the encryption key. So everyone can encrypt information and send it to you. But only you can decrypt it because you have the decryption key. Does that make sense? The nice thing is, this is how, if someone has a number they want to send me, like let's say they want to send me their credit card number, and I don't want someone else to be able to get their credit card number. Their computer, all web browsers have RSA built into them, so their computer will go get my key. They get my encryption key. And so they will encrypt all the information before they send it. If somebody else intercepts that information on the internet, which is very easy to do, by the way, it's very easy to intercept information on the internet and make a copy of everything that goes through a certain node or whatever. It's very easy to do. They'll get that information, but because it's encrypted, they won't know what the credit card number was. In fact, they'll know what the encryption key is, but it doesn't do them any good because they can only encrypt. They can't decrypt. They can't undo it. They need the decryption key to work. And this was done so long ago, you'd think by now it ought to have been broken, but it hasn't been. The only way we know how to break this is to be able to factor very large numbers, and there is not a very efficient way. No one's ever come up with a very efficient way to factor extremely large numbers. So it's still in use today. Almost every web transaction you do uses these two. These are the most common. There are a few other ones that they're sometimes used, but these two are the most common. And it keeps your information safe. In fact, it keeps your information so safe that people have stopped trying to break the code. Now they want to get your information in another way. Now they use phishing, right? There's no way they can break the code. So what they have to do is they have to send you out an email that is pretending to be your bank, saying, please, there's a problem with your account. Log in here. And it's got a little button. You press it, it takes you to a website that looks like your bank's website. You type in your password, and now they have your password. That's called phishing. Because there's no way they can actually break the information getting it on the internet anymore. It's too secure. So they have to try to get you to give up your code, get you to give your password. And that's why choosing a password is important. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, you can always come talk to me afterwards, or I'm always available. There's other stuff you can do. You can talk about how to choose a really good password. Actually, I'm going to talk about that in my very last thing. Because of that, we need to choose good passwords. Password information is stored in a way that's hashed, which what it means is when you choose a password at Google, they do not store your password. They do not know what your password is. What they do is they take your password and they run it through an algorithm that completely messes it up. And so what they record for your password is absolute gibberish. But they know how they got the gibberish, and they know that you can't undo it. It's such a complicated process. There's no way to undo what they did. They use what they call differential equations to make some really nasty hashes of your password. So when people break in and steal password files, like they break into major companies and steal their password files, whenever they break into a company, that's what they do. They go for the password file and they steal it. Then what they want to do is they want to figure out what everyone's password is. Unfortunately, they can't undo the hash. Well, fortunately, they can't undo the hash, right? Basically, the company doesn't know your password, and the company can't access your password because it doesn't have it. All it has is the hash. The only way to get your password is to try every password through the hash and see if it gives you the same. When you log in, you type your login, and it doesn't. When you type your password, it sends your password. It hashes your password and then sends that in to see if it matches. Does that make sense? So what happens is you got a secure connection. It sends in your password over the secure connection. Then it takes your password and it hashes it and see if it matches the gobbledygook that they have. And if it matches, then they know you typed in the right password. And if it doesn't match, then you say, that was the wrong password. But they have no idea what your password was, which is good because no one can steal it from them. However, people will get these files and they'll just start trying things. If your password is password, that's the first thing they do. They figure out what happens to the word password when you hash it, and they will look for those in the file. And password, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, A, B, C, D, E, real simple words. They'll try all of those, and it takes about 2 seconds, and they get about 5% of all passwords suddenly are all broken for them. This is why you have to be careful what password you pick. The best way to pick passwords is to make it statistically hard to guess. And the best way to do that is to make it long. Throwing in special characters, capitalizations, numbers, all this kind of stuff makes it a little bit more complicated. But length is by far the best. Here's what I would suggest for a password. Pick 4 words at random that you would remember that nobody else would. I'll just look at one here. Table, ink, light, love. There we go. You like that? Table, ink, light, love would make an excellent password. No spaces. If you want to throw in a capital letter somewhere, that's fine. Some websites require a number and a capital letter or something like that. So often I'll do that and throw in a number and a capital letter. But you know what? I can come up in my mind with a way to remember table, ink, light, love. Right? I can start thinking in my mind, oh, the table, I spilled ink on the table. Now I need to see it with a light, and it made a heart. So in my mind, I can remember that. And every time I go to my password table, ink like light love. You know, does everyone see what I'm talking about? It's an easy password for me to remember, but it's incredibly difficult for algorithms to try to guess your password. Cool? And that's the best way to make a password, so that if someone steals the password file from your company, a major break-in like they had with Equifax, right? They have all these passwords that are possibly dangerous, right? Use those weird long passwords, and those will be they'll be very difficult for anyone to guess. They're not going to guess your password. Your Facebook isn't going to be hacked that way. The only way to get your Facebook hacked if you use that password is if you get it phished. Someone puts up click here, log into Facebook, and you type in the login. Never, ever type in your password to a page that is not solicited by you. If you're not going directly to the page first, but if someone asks you to go to a page and type in your password, never do that. That's the way you get hacked. It's called phishing. So just don't ever do that. And that is how we keep our information secure today. Thank you very much.
When an individual is phishing for information from anybody else, is there any way to track who's doing the phishing?
If they're naive, there is. But most people who are actually phishing cover their tracks pretty well. There's a variety of different methods you can use to cover your tracks on the internet, and that's what they'll probably do. The best way, of course, is to go through a country that doesn't allow the US government to track them. And the biggest one like that, Russia. So a lot of the hacking goes through Russia. Even if the hackers aren't really Russian, they'll go through Russia because they know Russia has a lot of protections against the US government, so it's easy to hide your steps.
Those are VPNs, yeah? Those are VPNs.
Some of them, yeah. Other questions?
Why do most websites require an uppercase and a number if that doesn't really much?
Well, it's partly because it mattered for a while. You look at the time it takes to try to decode or try every password. And the processors people were using at the time could only go at a certain speed. And so they figured that if you had an 8-character password, and it wasn't just all lowercase letters, but you had to use all the letters, lowercase and uppercase, plus the numbers and special characters. It took so long to break the password that it was essentially secure. However, computer speeds are always changing, and now they're fast enough that those can be broken in a few days. So if you got a password file, within a couple days you can get all the passwords that are up to 8 characters, even if they have capital letters. And the thing is, if you make it twice as long, it takes every extra character you put takes 26 times longer to break. Does that make sense? Even if you're just using lowercase characters. So adding 10 characters is 26 times 26 times 26 times 20 times 6 is long. Does that make sense? So the length is actually much more valuable. We know that now, but back then, a lot of the computers were written a lot of the programs were written in such a way that they could only allow 8 to 12 characters in the password, which is annoying because then you have to up the number in different ways. So you use capitals and lower cases and stuff like that. But nowadays, good secure websites will allow you to use very long passwords. So you can put string forwards together and it'll be fine. So yeah, Google, in fact, it's getting to the point where a lot of companies don't want to do it themselves. They'll actually hire Google to verify who you are. So you'll say, to use our site, you need to log into your Google account first, and then it'll let you use our site. And they'll pay Google money to let Google verify who you are rather than doing it themselves. That's actually a lot more secure than them doing it themselves, because Google has more resources to make sure that they have good methods of encoding the information. Other questions? Thank you. Oh, question?
With the hacking speed being vastly increased, everybody if someone had access to a quantum computer or something like that?
Yeah, the quantum computing is not at the point right now where we can do much with that particular type of thing. It is suspected that if quantum computers actually work the way we think they might work, that they might make our current methods obsolete. However, we don't know, since we don't have the kind of quantum computers that could actually do that yet. So it's possible. Quantum computing may change everything.
Let's give Professor Carlson a round of